You start with a nice concept as your base. Then, as it starts to set in, you add in your characters to the mix and let the show simmer on low heat for several episodes. Once your viewers are content with the fun little adventure series following the shenanigans of an autistic adventurer and his party on a quest to save his sister, add in the world building to establish the full scope of the situation. Then immediately after, play out the mid-season climax and shake the whole thing up until you've changed the tone of the series. And after that, you let it cook for 12 episodes. Add in character development every now and then to maintain flavor, and garnish it with a Season 2 announcement. When I started Delicious in Dungeon, it was entirely on a whim. I saw a fantasy series that I thought might give me some small amount of enjoyment, and when I decided to check out the first episode, I was charmed by the characters and the concept of the story. It was something that I thought was decently enjoyable, and that was enough for me. What I was unaware of was the fact that this series would eventually turn out to be a dose of slow burn greatness that surprised me with how well it turned out to be written. Honestly, this was an unexpected treat over the last season, and it's one that I'm very happy to have watched. So let's begin. Delicious in Dungeon is the story of a party of adventurers led by Laios Todin, and begins shortly after their encounter with a dragon deep inside a dungeon. Laios' sister Fallon sacrifices herself to send the whole party to the surface when the dragon proves to be too much for them to handle. But he's not too keen on leaving her there. His attempt to organize a rescue party, however, quickly encounters several problems. Two of their party members immediately abandon them after escaping near death, and on top of their thinned numbers, the party hardly has any money to afford food for their delve. Laios is quick to produce a solution to that second problem, however, and proposes the idea of eating monsters during their journey, much to the chagrin of his two remaining companions. In spite of his eagerness, his first attempt at cooking a monster, however, doesn't go very well, and that attracts the attention of the dwarf Senshi. Turns out Senshi is a gourmet when it comes to dungeon food, and he agrees to accompany them on their journey deep into the dungeon. And that is based on nothing more than he and Laios sharing a mutual interest in dungeon cuisine. From then on, it's a series of misadventures and dark twists in a subterranean world run by a powerful and deranged magic user. Delicious in Dungeon starts off as a fun adventure series with a gourmet twist. That was the charm that got me to watch. I liked the quirky story and the dynamics going between the characters, and found the whole thing very relaxing to watch, as most of the time it was just the team overcoming various small obstacles with rather unique methods. And on top of that, I found the cast very well put together. First, we have Laios, who registers on the autism spectrum with his obsession with monsters. He isn't particularly good at much else, but his extensive knowledge of monsters and their habits gives him an incredible weapon to make up for his average sword skills and below average social skills. He's very much the lovable dork of the series and is a great face for the whole group. He's a dunce, but he's still a very good person at heart, and very heroic when the moment ends up calling for it. He tends to be the source of most of the comedy that keeps the show lively, and his encyclopedic knowledge is a powerful tool for a party who's largely understaffed. Marcille, the elven mage of the party, has her own unique quirks that make her funny in her own rights. She's very much stuck to the rules and opposed to doing most things that are considered abnormal, even if it's necessary for their survival. Her opposition to the methods Senshi uses for gathering and collecting food is one of the greatest markers of this. But this adherence to the standard rules and modes of operation stems largely from her incredible magic talent. She's good enough to hold off the mad mage who governs the dungeon for long enough to save her party. But more than that, her friendship with Fallon motivates her to return to the dungeon with Laios in order to get her friend back. Her sensibilities might be unusual, as she would be okay with sacrificing a dog to get some vegetables. And she may be pretty hypocritical in a few scenes, but she's overall someone you can like when you get to the core of her character. Next on the list is Chilchuck, the party's halfling scout, the one who keeps an ear out for monsters and traps. And he is very cynical of everything. He tags along with the group out of some sense of obligation, but he makes it very clear he's not personally attached to any of them. He's the character who has the most level head, and keeps everyone in line by attempting to squash all the bird brain schemes they come up with. His senses make him the voice of reason when all else seems to fall apart, and he's often the one to propose the most logical courses of action to keep the more eccentric members in line. However, he's no use in combat, as his small body leaves him generally incapable of properly wielding a weapon, which means he has to rely on a lot of the other people when it comes to fighting. And finally we have Senshi, the dwarven cook who's got a knack for throwing the party off with his antics. He's the one with all the cooking and food knowledge, and the one constantly egging on Laios' autism as they encounter monsters. He's a decently reliable fighter and someone whose knowledge of the dungeon comes in handy on more than one occasion, but that doesn't stop his eccentricity from causing problems. There are times where he makes absolute sense with what he does or says, and others where he's just as much a problem as Laios. Still, he's someone who gives a lot to the whole show, whether it be through comedy or through action. How these four make it through their problems by mixing and matching their various expertises is one of the creative and fun parts of the series. It makes it feel like a fully fun adventure you'd experience in a tabletop game, as they often concoct wild schemes to overcome problems normal parties with full membership would have little problem dealing with. A good example of this is when, instead of using traditional magic to defeat a bunch of ghosts that the whole party was unable to deal with, Senshi bottled up some holy water and swung it around like a flail to defeat the ghosts. But that also makes them very well equipped to deal with just about anything that gets thrown their way. This out-of-the-box method of adventuring proves to be the party's great strength that gets them through the toughest challenges. The wacky misadventures they experience on their way to the bottom are the bread and butter of the first core of the anime, as you don't really get a good look at the world or the darker side of the story until several episodes in. So it's solid fun for antics up until somewhere around episode 9. It was at that point we get a very deep look into the darker nature of the dungeon this story takes place in, and how it rewrites the rules of life and death with black magic. They start discussing how the elves would eventually become interested in the spell that grants immortality to those within the dungeon, and that it was a race against time to claim the dungeon's power for themselves before the elves inevitably came to the country and laid claim to it. It's a brilliant little twist in the tone of the series that changed the whole thing for me. Following this revelation that the dungeons are often subject to the whims of the elves who treat the world as if they rule it, we get to the ever-important battle against the red dragon that ate Fallon. The team finds a way to bring the dragon down, and after a very close call with death as their plans go awry, they find that normal means of resurrecting Fallon won't actually work because of the state her body is in. So Marcille decides to take the risk and play God with dark magic to bring her friends back using the carcass of the dragon as a catalyst, only for the Mad Mage to show up in an episode later and turn Fallon into a dragon chimera that kills most of the adventurers who have gathered in the area for several overlapping reasons. And that's only going to the midpoint of this season. It's fun adventures layered with solid character development and good world building to add tension and stakes to the group delving ever deeper into the dungeon in hopes of saving one of their own. It actually really hooked me with the story, even if it took a little bit to really expand on what was going on outside of "we're just gonna save Fallon." On the production front, it was very good. All the animation holds up incredibly well, and it gives me the sense that the studio really cares about what they were making. It's got moments that are actually really well animated in it, and the use of exaggerated movement, as all anime tends to do, and the over-the-top reactions helps to sell the comedy even in the heat of dire situations. The intros to this series are also very good. Both of them were stuck in my head on a loop for weeks, though it took some time for the second one to really settle in for me, and that added another layer of enjoyment to this anime. The only thing this series really fails at is being a gourmet anime, which it does kind of sell itself as. If you go into this expecting something more akin to Food Wars, you'll likely be disappointed. Where Delicious in Dungeon really shines is as an adventure series. There are moments that really do get you in the feels. The characters are a great balance of quirks, strengths, and flaws that all mesh well and make the whole cast a cohesive unit. And the animation overall isn't to die for, but it's still very good. I do highly recommend this series. It was very fun and a great surprise to be so enjoyable to watch. I give it a solid 9 out of 10, with the only things that really fail being the gourmet aspect, the score, and the animation not being absolutely perfect. They're hardly the worst critiques, but they still add up to something over time. But I think that's about enough out of me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons, as those simple but free actions do really help me. And if you have any thoughts of your own, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I hope you join me in the next one. Later.